Okay, so I'm going to be continuing now chapter 4, not chapter 2, chapter 4, where we were last time. We only did the first 3 paragraphs of chapter 4. And in chapter 4, this is the first time Rav Kook takes tshuva out of the personal and takes it into society, where he sees the movement of tshuva not as just a relationship between man and God on the personal level, but also movement of society, Jewish society on the one hand, and also universal society, all of mankind. And he also believes that when the Jews get their act together and mankind gets its act together, the world will be redeemed, the cosmos will be redeemed, meaning it's sort of like automatic. After man sets the course, then even the animals won't eat each other. The garza evim keves, the wolf shall lie down with the lamb. So, which of course from Yeshayahu. So let's go to this right now. Okay, I turned on the recording. So let's go over number 3 again. General penitence, tshuva klalit, which involves raising the world to perfection, meaning not just the Jewish people, but the whole world. And even particularized penitence where it pertains to the individual, including the smallest constituents of special penitential reforms that the Holy Spirit can itemize in its tiniest details, they all constitute one essence, which means it's the same thing when a person wants to change their life, because in a person's life, you have the whole world. Because at the end of the day, I'm just me. All my experiences in life are me. So if I can improve myself, I've improved my own world, right? Because in the end, it's like the statement, I think it was Ben Isai said, Imani kan hakol kan. If I am here, everything's here. Because in my life, everything goes through my perception. So if I'm here, everything's here. Some people took this very seriously, by the way, and wondered, if I don't perceive something, does it happen? In other words, the famous scenario, if a tree falls in the forest, but there was nobody there to hear it fall, did it actually make a sound? Because nobody heard it. So is there meaning to a sound that nobody heard? So if life is a life of our perceptions, so the way we perceive the world is our world. It's our whole world. So every individual is a world. That's what the Talmud says in Sanhedrin. Every person is a world. So if you kill a person, you kill the whole world. Now the Talmud says it's because that person and all the generations that could have come from that person has been stopped. So yes, biologically, by killing a person, you're killing a whole world that could have come from that person, emerged from that person. But also, every individual actually is their own world. They are perceiving the world. They're relating to the world through their consciousness. It's their own world. Every person is their own story and their own world. So Rav Kook is saying there's a direct relationship between tshuva on the personal level, which means bringing all the aspects of my individuality to fruition. Myself as physically taking care of myself, emotionally getting myself straight, not to get angry too much, teach myself how to be thankful. My father always said you have to learn how to be thankful. It's part of being a human being. And it also makes you optimistic. And then, of course, then it goes to the level of trying to understand and also trying to develop myself as a human being and as a spiritual side too, through my soul. So once you get all this together, this is very similar to what mankind has to do. Mankind has to do tshuva first and foremost on the physical level. We have to provide a health service for even people who can't afford it, right? That's called helping people on a physical way. You have to provide services for the hungry, for the poor, who can't work, to the invalids, to the handicapped. I'm not talking about lazy people who have nothing better to do, but people who objectively have difficulties. Society has to help them. That's the tshuva of society on the physical level. Then there's the tshuva of society on the moral level, just like the tshuva of man on moral level he talked about it, Musar Klayot. The tshuva of man on ethical level is to try to prevent wars, even if they are to your benefit. And every war is to the benefit of some country, unfortunately. That's why stopping wars is also an act, an ethical act, a moral act, that we care more about human lives than we do about the benefit that can come out of plundering the assets of that country to our benefit. Then, of course, you have the level of being human, education, helping people support themselves educationally, enabling them to have homes, communities, to live their lives in the way they can understand, but to promote a good society. And then also to promote spiritual health of people. You don't have to dictate to them what to do, but you should allow it. So just like the individual has these levels, so does society have the levels too. The levels of society parallel the levels that he described within individual teshuvah. I'm going back to it. That's what he said. Through the thoughts particular penitence and the penitence which come bringing the world to perfection, all the same, all constitute one essence. Similarly, all the cultural reforms to which the world rises from decadence, the improvements in the social and economic order, through this redress of every form of wrongdoing, from the most significant to the minutest ordinance of later sages, the most extreme demands of ethically sensitive spirits, all of them constitute an inseparable whole, which means in society, all this has to happen. There has to be social reforms and cultural reforms and improvement in society, economically, and as I said, educationally and helping people, etc. This is the way that society does tshuva. When all societies do tshuva, this is universal tshuva. They're not expected to study Torah. These are the sons of Noach. They have 7 commandments. One of them is setting up a society based on a court system. Then, of course, there's not to murder, not to steal, not to commit adultery or incest, not to curse God, not to eat an animal while it's still alive, to take its life first. It doesn't have to be necessarily through shechita. And to believe in the one God. So these are the 7 Noahide laws, but they all have to do with the concept of the tshuva, universal teshuva. All of these integrate to form one entity. This is based on a quote from the Zohar. So what he's basically saying is that personal penitence of the individual is a paradigm through which you can understand what society as a whole should be focusing on, the same 4 levels. The body, meaning health, morality, which he called the heart, the intellect, and the soul, right? So again, it's like health, morality, human fulfillment, let's call it, and then spiritual fulfillment. Number 4, the nature of all existence, never particular creature, the whole of human history, and the life of every individual must be seen from one comprehensive perspective, as one essence, which has many parts. Then will come readily the perception that will condition the emergence of penitence. When you understand it's all related, there's a famous story the Talmud says about a certain individual, a certain rabbi who said, when I was a young man, I wanted to redeem the whole world. I wanted to save the world. When I got a little bit older, I said, you know what? At least I should save my country. Start with that. I got a little bit older. I said, you know what? Let me start with my community. When I got older than that, I said, you know what? Maybe I should just start with my family first. And then finally, when I came to old age, I said, maybe I should just start with myself and see what happens. So we go, sometimes when you're young, you go backwards because you have to start with yourself. If you can't get yourself on the right track, how can you explain to others what to do? Shot atzmecha tchila. Reprove yourself first. And then if you think you got yourself right, then you have something to teach others.
Isn't that about tikkun olam also, Rav?
Sorry?
Isn't there something with tikkun olam? Because that's something I've studied before. That you
Well,
should.
tikkun olam is what he was just talking about before, bettering society. No?
Yeah, but then okay, but that makes sense. But if you do tikkun olam, shouldn't you first look at yourself and then do tikkun olam?
Yeah. If I'm into bettering society, but I am not getting along with my family members, so what example am I setting? If I'm angry with my friends and I mistreat them, so I'm worried about tikkun olam. Yeah, everything starts from home. It starts from ourselves and it starts from home. We also have to learn to treat ourselves correctly too, not take ourselves for granted. When you're young, you think you're going to live forever, so you take yourself for granted. At a certain point, it catches up with you. So, that point is not necessarily so far away. Sometimes it could be 35. Different people have different dispositions. But tikkun olam is one of the ideas. We say, but tikkun olam b'malchut shaddai. We say, Aleinu l'shabech. Tikkun olam is not just helping people, it's helping them understand their relationship as human beings and their relationship before God. Because in the end of the day, if there's no belief in God, there's no strong justification for being a good person. It's too dependent on the will of the individual. And not every individual has a strong will. Even when it comes to crime, it's like that. You know, there are three things that keep us away from doing a crime. One of them is that we have a conscience and we want to do the right thing. The next one is if we do the wrong thing, we get a guilty conscience. Right? The next thing, if the guilty conscience doesn't help, is that we don't want to be embarrassed before our friends and family that we did something wrong. And if that doesn't work, there's the law. And the police can arrest you. So they have 3 or 4 what I call defense mechanisms that keep a person from doing the wrong thing. So people are self-motivated. They don't need all these defense mechanisms. But the first defense mechanism, as I said, is a guilty conscience. The second defense mechanism is that we don't want to be embarrassed. And the third one is that there's law and you break the law, you could be put into jail, you could be fined. Yeah. But hopefully you want to be the type of person who doesn't need the mechanisms. So the same thing with other things that the law doesn't deal with. A person has to believe in God, or else there's no belief in giving a reckoning, in being held accountable. Belief in God means we're held accountable when we do bad. If there's no God, then we don't believe we'll be held accountable if we kill people. It's like Joseph Stalin once said, when you kill a person, you're a criminal and a murderer. You kill 1 million people, you go down in history. That's the problem. Yeah, and Stalin, unfortunately, knew exactly what he was talking about. He killed about 60 million people, more than Hitler. So this is also interesting. Number 6, which is also something about Rav Kook, which I think a lot of people don't understand. The highest sensibility, Rav Kook says, in the soul of the people of Israel is the quest for universality. The people aspire for this by the very essence of their being, and this affects all existence. The desire for penitence in its highest form is rooted in this hidden longing. Rav Kook claims there is an inborn sensitivity of the Jewish people that we want to help the whole world. There's something unusual about us as a people. We have this universal side to us. You know, in the United States, aside from the Constitution, you have what's called the Bill of Civil Rights. The Bill of Civil Rights of the United States, 24%, 25% of what was written in the Bill of Civil Rights was written by Jews in the United States. Even Jews don't constitute more than 5% of that country. There's something about Jews that we push ourselves to try to change mankind. Same thing, Nobel Prizes. About 20% of Nobel Prizes worldwide were won by Jews. And in the world, Jews are not even 1% of the world. But there's something about us that we take our universalism very seriously. The Torah called us Am Segula, a chosen people, and we actually, many of us, take it very seriously. I think for that reason, there are also Jews who feel that being Jewish is too limiting. They want to be universal. They want to be cosmopolitan, part of the great world. It's just a misunderstanding of that sensibility. Rav Ashkenazi used to say that when a Jew lives in the Galut, they can be cosmopolitan. They can feel that they're part of the greater world. And if they give a contribution to mankind, if they're Freud and make a contribution in psychology, or if they're Einstein and make a contribution to physics, it's not the Jews who made the contribution, it's them as an individual. When Jews live in Israel, they're actually universal. Because when a Jew in Israel gets a Nobel Prize, it's the Jewish people got a Nobel Prize. When a Jew in Israel gets a medal at the Olympics, it's Israel that got the medal, and not just that individual. So actually in the land of Israel, despite the fact that it looks like we're putting all the Jews in one place, which we're doing, that's what puts us back on the stage of history again. That's when the world looks at us again as a nationality and not just as individuals living in their communities. But Rav Kook says we do have such a sensibility in the soul of the people of Israel. We do have this quest for universality. It's ingrained within us, because if not, we would never be able to fulfill our mission, which is to be a light to the nations. But unfortunately, a lot of Jews just misinterpret it. They think that Tikkun Olam is only about helping others and has nothing to do with the Jewish people. You have a lot of American Jews. We don't have to help the Jews. The Jews are doing fine. We have to just help the countries in Africa because they don't have. The Jews are fine. So we don't do any of that. Many of them, the vast majority of Jewish philanthropists do not help Jewish causes at all. They don't give to Jewish schools or to synagogues or to Israel or to the combined Jewish appeal or anything. They figure Jews, they're fine. You have to give to the people who really need. So this is that's a misguided universalism, because the poor of your community come before the poor of other communities. Because if you don't take care of your own, what does it mean to take care of others? If you have poor people in your community and you're only helping the poor of the other city, what type of person are you? So unfortunately, there are some Jews who don't get that fine point. Here's another interesting one. This whole chapter has lots of interesting stuff. The soul of the people of Israel expresses itself in the striving for absolute justice, which to be effectuated must include the realization of all moral virtues. It is for this reason that any moral misdeed committed by an individual Jew weakens this link with the soul of the people. The basic step in penitence is to attach oneself to the soul of the people. Together with this, it's mandatory to mend one's ways and one's actions in conformity with the essential characteristic of the people's soul. does that mean? Ever notice how many Jewish lawyers there are? Have you noticed how many Jewish lawyers there are in Israel? Lots of them. Almost every Chaver Knesset is a lawyer. They just couldn't get a job as a lawyer, so they went into politics. Lots and lots of lawyers here. Right? Every good Jewish mother wants her son to be a doctor or a lawyer. A rabbi, that's not such a good profession for a Jewish boy. But a doctor, a lawyer, yeah. It's like this woman's in a plane. She says, I'm not feeling well. I need a doctor. Doctor runs over, says, yes, ma'am, I'm a doctor. Can I help you? She says, do I have a daughter for you? Say that every Jewish woman has, they want a doctor or a lawyer. Their son to be a lawyer. So, because we study Talmud, we study law. That's what they study in yeshiva. We take law very, very seriously. I don't think other people take the law as seriously as we do. As Jews, we almost have an idyllic concept of law, that law exists without people, because we have the concept of Torah, which is the concept of the law. But people who don't have that concept, they don't see laws like us. For them, a lot of people see laws as something to be broken. Hey, if I can get away with it, it's a big deal. So, yeah, there's countries like that, but I won't mention them, where people, that's the way that people grow up. If you can get away with it and break the law, what's the problem? We teach that law is something holy, something sanctified. So Jews take law very, very seriously, even when they're chiloni, when they're completely secular. They understand laws as moral absolutes. It's not clear that this is true, by the way, when you talk about human law. There's an interesting argument. There was a fellow by the name of Lawrence Kohlberg. He was a professor at Harvard. He was actually, I think, in the education department. But he was a student of Jean Piaget, the Swiss psychologist, who created a lot of theories about education for children. And he had a stage theory of education. And Kohlberg created an ethical stage theory based on the theories of Piaget. So Kohlberg claims that you have two types of people in his stage theory. You have those who see laws of the land as absolutes, meaning if this is the law, it's like God-given. It doesn't matter if people did it. And so if you break the law, you're a bad person. He says, but then there are people who are much more self-propelled, and they understand that there are certain moral laws that are even above the laws of the state, because sometimes the laws of the state are mistaken. There's a lot of people don't get that. To understand that there could be a moral law that could transcend a state law. One time I parked my car on Agron Street in Yerushalayim, and I put money. We used to have these. They don't even have them anymore today. Parking meters. There used to be parking meters in Yerushalayim. You had to put coins into the parking meter. So you put a coin in the parking meter. It's good for half an hour, for how much you put it in. So I'm running towards the parking meter because I know it's supposed to run out in any minute. As I come to the parking meter, the guy for the city who wears a police uniform, but he's not a police, works for the city, the guys who give out the tickets. He sees me running towards the meter. He says to me, you're one of the good ones who wants to put money in the parking meter and doesn't want it to be in for free. I'm thinking to myself, that's amazing. This guy has such a simple concept of life. They're the good people who pay the parking meter and the bad people who don't pay the parking meter. Life is simple. They're just two categories. So there are some people like that. That's the way the guys who keep the law are the good people, the guys who break the law are the bad people. Of course, you have people come along like Kohlberg and they start asking very difficult questions. But anyhow, that's not our discussion. Rav Kook is basically saying, and I think this is the truism, that law is perceived by Jews as something holy. If it's not religious Jews, then they see the law of the land as holy. Unless, of course, it's a terrible land. But if it's a regular society, they see law as a holy concept. And Jews really like law. They like going into law, except, of course, in countries where they're not allowed to be lawyers. Aside from that, they do. Let's take another one. The highest form of penitence is penitence inspired by the idea of honoring God. Okay, this one, in order to understand it, I have to take you to another part of the book, but I don't have it here, so I'm going to jump over it at the moment. I'll go that. If we have time, I'll do that one either today or next time, because it's connected to something else. It was number 8, right? Let's do number 9. Various forces will stimulate the emergence of penitence. Teshuva is going to happen. Rambam writes in his Laws of Teshuva, Muftachim anu, sha'atidim Yisrael asot teshuva. We have a promise that the Jewish people will eventually do Teshuva. Rav Kook writes, various forces will stimulate the emergence of penitence, both on the national level and on the international level. A special factor in this process will be the anguish felt over the humiliation visited on great spiritual treasure of our ancestral heritage, which is of incomparable vigor and nobility. Meaning, eventually Jews will turn around and realize that the Jewish people has taken their heritage for granted. And when we realize how much wealth there is within our own writings, our own heritage, we'll start taking it seriously too. This great spiritual treasure derives from the source of life, the highest order of the divine, which has been transmitted from generation to generation. Our tradition, the Torah, comes directly from God and it's been given to us from generation to generation. But when you have something, you take it for granted. It's the nations of the world who realize that there's something unusual about us. But we never see it. The Talmud says, En Baal Hanes Makir Biniso. If a miracle happens to you, you don't realize it. It's the people watching you from the outside who realize it. If a person was in an accident and they totaled their car was like turned into an accordion, and they walk out unscathed, people say, wow, that was a miracle. But the person who walked out of the car doesn't feel it was a miracle because they feel okay. Okay, they might get a little whiplash, but they feel fine. They don't see the miracle. The person standing on the side saw the miracle. So, ein balanes makir b'niso. When a miracle happens to you, you don't realize it. The others do. This we have in Tehillim. It says in Tehillim, chapter 126, the famous one, Shir Ma'alot. V'shuv Hashem Shivat Zion ayinu kochomim. When God brought our exiles, our captives, back to Israel, we were like dreamers. Az yamalei schokpinu l'shonim reina. Then were our mouths filled with joy and with happiness. Az yomru v'goyim. Then the nations shall say, God has done great to this people. God has done great to us. We were happy. Very interesting verse. The first part of the verse says, then will the nations say, meaning when the Jews come back to Zion, to Israel, the nation will say, wow, God has done great things to this Jewish people. He's bringing them back to their land. And then the Jews will turn around and say, they're right. God has done great to us. We should be happy. But the Jews will not realize it until the non-Jews tell them. Tehillim chapter 126, black on white. You can't miss it. Same thing, Isaiah chapter 2 says the exact same thing. It says, Vayaba charit hayamim, it will be in the end of days. All the nations shall go up to the house of Jacob and say to the Jewish people, they will say, Kumo v'del hal har Hashem. They'll say, let's go up to the house of God, to the house of Jacob, and may he teach us from his ways, and we shall walk in some of his ways. Because out of Zion shall go forth the Torah and the word of God from Yerushalayim. And then the next verse says, Beit Yaakov l'chu v'nelcha b'or Hashem. House of Jacob, let's walk in the ways of God. Radak David Kimchi, the famous Italian commentator, says that after the nations shall openly say, let's go up to the house of Jacob to learn from his Torah, then the Jews will turn around and they will say, yeah, actually, house of Jacob, we should also go in the ways of God. I mean, the nations will understand that before the Jews do. Ein balanes makir b'niso. When you have a miracle happen to you, you don't realize it until somebody tells you. That's why we take the state of Israel for granted. We figure, we're born here, some of us. We have a state already, 75 years. We don't take it, so a lot of Israelis just don't take it seriously. They don't take it for granted. They take it for granted. If you took the state of Israel seriously, you would not do anything to hurt it. You would only do things to support it. You wouldn't even threaten to hurt it. That's called taking it seriously. Also, when you take it seriously, you realize it doesn't belong to me, it belongs to everybody. So, great spiritual treasure derives from the source of life. It has been transmitted from generation to generation. When one is attentive to it, you can find everything in it. Like it says in Pirkei Avot, hafoch ba v'hafoch ba dekule ba. Turn it this way, turn it that way, because everything is included within it. Everything precious and beautiful. The denial of our religion has led many to detach themselves from this fruitful corner, stray in alien fields looking for other spirituality, which has no sustained nourishment for us at all, because it does not relate to our soul. You have spiritual entities which relate to the souls and the cultures of the people where they grew, because that nation needed that. But every nation has their needs, and the Torah understands us. That's why a non-Jew does not have to keep the Torah. It's not for them. If they want to become Jewish, it becomes for them, because then it is discovered that the Torah was for them already from the beginning. But in general, no, they have their way of spirituality. All they have to believe in the one God, but the way they come to the one God is their path. But a lot of Jews, because of the galut, we've fallen off the path. And we start looking for everything in other religions except for our own. This fellow told me one time he went to the Dalai Lama in Tibet. And he said, I want to learn about spirituality, about God. The guy said to him, where are you from? He said, I came here from Israel. I want to learn about it. He said to him, do you know anything about Judaism? He said, no, but I came here. He says, no, go back to Israel. First learn about Judaism, then come to meet with me. The Dalai Lama, by the way, had a lot of Jewish friends. But there's a lot of truism to that, because if you don't know your own connection and your own path to God, how can you learn from others? Once you know your own path and you learn from others, it will enrich you. If you don't know your own path, it'll just mix you up. But once you know your own path, yes, the path of everybody will enrich you. It'll make you see things from different ways. When one is attentive, one can find everything in it, everything precious and beautiful. The denial of our religion has led many to detach themselves from this fruitful corner, to stray into alien fields which have no sustaining nourishment for us. Its great anguish will erupt powerfully, and it will come with a discretion and moderation. Know what positive elements may be garnered from the different paths of straying on which they have stumbled. Free stirring of holiness inside the soul will emerge from its imprisonment. Every sensitive spirit will begin to drink avidly from the exalted source of life. The Rav Kook says there's going to be a major detachment from Judaism. Many, many Jews are going to leave, and it already started in his lifetime, in the post-emancipation period. But he says this was supposed to happen. Before the emancipation, Jews were locked up into their communities, so they didn't even have the option. But now that the option opened, they're going to have to stumble across these foreign elements in order to eventually find themselves. Just like the Jewish people had to be enslaved in Egypt before they could be given the Torah, they had to understand what they are not. because the Egyptian culture is the antithesis of the Torah. It's the culture that worships the dead. And the Torah is the tree of life. So when Jews stray into other cultures, at a certain point, they start realizing the significance of their own. Then will be engendered and become revealed as one whole, knowledge and feeling, the enjoyment of life, a world outlook, and a desire for national revival, the redress of spiritual defects, the revitalization of physical vigor, the ordering of the political system, the love for improvement of community and good manners and tolerance, together with a lively impatience with everything ugly and evil. To support these goals, we need a conditioning of the human heart towards the true inner Torah, mystical meanings of the Torah. Its influence on the ill-prepared students have led so many to reject them and mock them. Rav Kook believes that it's just a matter of time that Jews will start looking back at the Torah and trying to look for meaning. But we have to prepare ourselves for that moment. We need people who are going to understand the Torah in the most profound way, who will be able to understand through the secrets of Torah what the Torah is really trying to teach. Because you're not going to get a lot of chances. For every individual, you'll get one shot at it. They will come to you. They will ask the question. If they get the wrong answer, it'll be another 20 years before you see them again. So we need teachers who will know how to inspire. On Friday night, I was at the table. It was my brother-in-law's sort of cousin. It's the husband of his cousin. He grew up in Israel, but he was born in Romania. And he said he grew up in a family which was not religious, but they always went to synagogue on Shabbat. And when they came to Israel, they lived in Yaffo, and they also went to synagogue on Shabbat. They were not very religious. They sort of like kosher at home. So one day his father was working for the city of Tel Aviv. And he was asked to fix something in the synagogue by the city. So they went with another plumber. It was on Shabbat, but the city told them to do it for whatever reason, that they had to do it sometime. And so he was in the synagogue and they're working on something on Shabbat, and the rabbi goes by. And he looks through the window. He thought it was burglars, didn't know what was going on. Finally, he sees these guys fixing something in the plumbing on Shabbat. He got so angry, he started shouting at them and calling them names. He said, after that, my father never went back to the synagogue. You never know, if you say the wrong thing, how you're going to affect 2 generations of people. Because the son didn't go back to the synagogue either. You have to be very, very careful. So Rav Kook says, it's going to happen. The people are going to be living in their land. They're going to be interested in Judaism and the Torah. Somebody has to set it right. Because if people start making mistakes and start bullying them and telling them to go away, you just ruined the chance of these people coming back. There has to be a place for love, for improvement of community and good manners and tolerance, together with a lively patience with everything ugly and evil. To support these goals, we're going to need a conditioning of the human heart towards the true inner Torah, its mystical meanings, whose influence on ill-prepared students have led so many to reject them and to mock them. Because so many people, the reason why Kabbalah is not being taken seriously in his day, Rav Kook says, is because the people who study it don't understand it. But when people start understanding it, they're going to understand this is an inner interpretation of Judaism. It's a new way of seeing these things. It is, however, this very source of life, giving light, whose influence on the ill-prepared engenders peril and trouble for the world that will be proved to be a source of enduring deliverance. From this source will come the healing light, which to revitalize the community and the individual, raise the fallen tabernacle of David, remove the humiliation of the people of God from the earth. It's the secrets of Torah, the new understandings of Torah, which will develop in the land of Israel, which will be able to bring the people back. But you need agents who are going to spread these ideas. And the more, the better. Because it has to be, Rav Kook says the reason why he's going to say that later, but I don't know if we'll get to that today. The reason why so many Jews have left Torah is because they were taught a very shallow understanding of what the Torah is about. And some of these people were real thinkers. When you hear a shallow interpretation of what Torah is about, you reject it. Because you know that's not serious. But when you hear a serious interpretation of Torah, then you start to think that maybe there's something there. But unfortunately, a lot of people who call themselves rabbis, they don't know anything. And then they can talk to people who are religious, but they definitely cannot talk to people who are not religious because they don't know how to explain the Torah. They can tell you what to do, but to explain the Torah, they just don't know. I don't blame anybody, by the way. Not everybody has that skill, but I'm just saying, if you don't have that skill, don't pretend you do. That's all. Are there any questions at this point? Because I've said quite a bit. There's another 2 things here, 3 things we didn't do yet. Okay. I think at this point, oh, Tanya, hello. I didn't see you here. Are there any questions? Okay, I think I'll just hold it at this time. I think next week we'll just finish off this chapter. There are another 3 things that have to be discussed. Where Rav Kook talks about why there's such a rebellion against Torah in his generation. Why there's so many Jews who have moved away from keeping Torah, which he sees as something which has to happen at the beginning of the Messianic period, because in order to come to a greater consciousness of Torah, you have to rebel against the shallow understanding. He says there's no other way. You cannot create a deep understanding of Torah if you're coming from a shallow understanding. You have to have a breaking of the vessels, as they would say in Kabbalah, in order to receive a higher light. But then you have to create larger vessels, which means you have to create better understandings in order to receive that higher light. So you have to prepare people to say to them that actually there are other ways to understand this. But you know, a lot of people are afraid of having deeper understandings of the Torah. Religious Jews too. They like the familiar. So sometimes when you come along with so if somebody's intellectual, they will always be interested in a deeper understanding of Torah. If they're not necessarily so. But Rav Kook is looking for those who have the lofty souls, the ones who are really the intellectuals of the Jewish people, and he wants to influence them, because when you influence the head, it affects the rest of the body. That's the way society works. So you have to have people who are able to give those explanations. Okay, friends, Toda Rabba. Thank you for joining today. And I think we have one more meeting. Was this 5 or 6? I'm not sure exactly.